Hello and welcome to Game Design Hour. I'm your host, Miles Goldsmith, and on each episode, I sit down with the people behind the video games you know and love. On today's episode, I sat down with one of the game devs behind the video game Thronefall. Thronefall is a really cool minimalist strategy tower defense type game that is currently in early access. Without any further ado, let's meet our guests and get into the interview.
My name is Paul, and I don't have a specific job title actually, because I'm just one half of Grizzly Games, which is a very tiny indie game studio I run together with my friend Jonas. And we used to be 3 people, but now it's just the 2 of us. We originally met during our studies in Berlin, where we both studied game design. And this is also where we founded the company, initially as means to publish the games we created in our university program. And then somehow it went quite well, and now here we are. Awesome. Still creating little games and publishing them.
So what was the first thing that for you really sparked your interest in creating video games?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if there was like a specific point where I developed an interest to create video games myself. I can remember that I obviously played video games as a kid and enjoyed them very much. And I remember coming up with my own game ideas back then. I think I didn't realize back then that it was actually an option to create games myself, because nobody in my environment had any computer science experience or any experience with how to do that. So I assumed it was just something big companies could do. I guess it's also why I never tried to create any games before joining the university program. And then, even after school, I didn't really know that this option existed. So I initially had several different plans, one of them including studying completely different things. But then in the end, I ended up in a computer science program where I realized quite quickly that it's not what I was going for. It was very technical, and I imagined that would be the best path to get into video games, but then I quickly figured out it was not going to be the right thing for me. And only then I discovered that we had this program in Berlin, or back then I think we had 2 public programs, like state-funded programs in Germany. The program I eventually joined in Berlin was one of them. So I guess it took a while for me to figure out that this was actually an option.
So the program you were talking about was a game design college program?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure how it exactly translates to the education system you have in the US, but here it was basically something you would do after high school, and was on a state-funded university, so free to join for everybody. And since we also don't have any study fees here, which is pretty much open to just go there and join.
Not all game designers study it in college. What do you feel were the benefits for you of studying game design in college?
I think the biggest upside to it was definitely meeting the other people that were there, because you're surrounded by people that have similar interests, and as I said, Jonas and we met there, so it's a great environment to find like-minded people and maybe team up with them. And then also having the structure of being able to work with those people continuously on projects. The whole approach was very practical, so we didn't do a whole lot of studying. It was mainly just creating games together. So usually the year was split in 2 semesters, and the semester would usually look like you just get on kind of like a topic for the semester, and then you team up with people and you create a game or a little project that relates to this topic. So just having this structure and this environment to really try yourself out and see what you enjoy about the process, that was super helpful for sure. I mean, there wasn't anything I think you couldn't have done on your own as well, but just having the structure provided, surely it helps a lot.
So how did you all first think of the idea for Thronefall, and what was the sort of initial brainstorming process for the game?
Well, Thronefall was the first game Jonas and I did as just 2-person team. Before that, we were a 3-person team, as I mentioned already. And Friedemann eventually decided to leave the company because he wanted to pursue different ideas. Like, there are no hard feelings or anything. We're still good friends, but I think he just wanted to move in a different direction. But before, he was mainly responsible for the game's visual direction and art style. So we kind of had this hole to fill there. That was definitely one thing that was very different for us this time when we started the development of Thronefall. So we tried to stick to things that have worked for us in the past, and that was usually just building a lot of different prototypes in the beginning and see what ideas generally just appeal to us, and then trying to evaluate after that. But for some reason, maybe because it was just the two of us, and it's then even easier to get carried away, we committed pretty quickly to an idea that was loosely based on having a deck building game that is about managing your little kingdom, which turned out to be a very stupid idea. Like, it didn't work at all. It was no fun, and we kind of just got lost in the development and wasted a good 3 months there. And then at that point where we realized that we were kind of stuck in the whole development and that we are not moving anywhere, we decided to basically scrap everything besides the original fantasy, because that really appealed to us. The whole idea of being responsible for your little kingdom and kind of managing it, maybe. And then we just started prototyping again, just based on this fantasy, and tried to come up with interesting ideas that catered to this specific fantasy. And then we kind of just developed the idea, I think, over time to have this very, very simple gameplay that's obviously a bit inspired by Thomas Fannenberg's Kingdom series. I don't know if you played it, but this little pixel art side-scroller game where you also build a little kingdom in a similar way.
So to me, the game felt like a evolution on the classic tower defense type games with a new twist where the player is now more involved in the actual defending of the tower. Can you tell me a bit about your decision to kind of build the game in that way?
Yeah, I think it was the result of several things. First of all, of course, we're just inspired by the games around us. And back then, Vampire Survival was a big thing. So this general idea of having a character moving around and fighting off enemies probably was somehow present in our minds, at least. And then we also always strive to simplify existing concepts with the games we create. And I feel like with traditional tower defense games, there comes a lot of complex decision making with it, and usually they are heavily UI based. So you click with your mouse or tap with your finger on things, and then you place buildings, and you always have to decide what building to place where and how to spend your money wisely. And then suddenly it gets very complex very soon. And we still wanted to keep some of the complexity, but we want to have a very simple interaction with the whole system. And then just having a character as kind of like the center of your interaction and actually traveling with that character through the world turned out to be just a very accessible way to interact with the whole system.
Pretty much every game has strange or interesting ideas that were thought about at one point. You all worked on it for a little bit and then ended up cutting it. What were some of those sort of strange and interesting ideas that you all thought about for this game but just ended up cutting?
Well, definitely trying to make a card game of it. But let me think. I think there was a couple more, especially in the beginning. We had the idea of those kind of large weapons you could build, and then you could the idea was you could maybe mount them and control them yourself, like a massive ballista kind of thing you could sit in and then shoot at your enemies, or maybe we are going to reintroduce some of those elements even in some of the updates to come. But we also had ideas for more active defense elements, like kind of maybe locks you could drop from your walls, or something you could just trigger during combat to fire. But that in the end turned out to be a bit too complex, and it just didn't feel that good.
So what was your process for designing each of the levels?
That was a bit of a chaotic one, actually. We were figuring it out just on the go, because the games we worked on before relied heavily on procedural content. So we weren't used to actual level design or building levels. Before, we just always came up with a kind of algorithm that generated everything on the fly. But for Thronefall, that was clearly no option because the levels rely heavily on this structure of buildings that are connected to each other, and they have to be connected in a way that makes sense. And I guess it would be very, very hard to come up with an algorithm that would provide you with a good structure there. So yeah, I think at first we just tried to come up with a very simple art style that allowed us to build the levels fairly quick, because we didn't have so much time we could dedicate to only level building. And then also none of us is a real artist, so we kind of had to come up with something that was quite easy to produce. And then actually from there, the art set provided us with a great set of tools to very quickly iterate on levels, because everything is so flat shaded. You can very easily stick geometry into each other and build new shapes out of existing models. So for instance, each level consists of only one rock and one tree shape. So we built all the different kind of rock formations and mountains and stuff out of a single rock shape. We just rotate and stretch and stuff into each other, but you can't really see because of the shading. Yeah, and then I think we just went with it. Jonas usually came up with the gameplay part, so he thought hard about what would the best way to set up the different building structures for each level, so every level provide something unique to explore. And then once Jonas was finished with the game design part, I started the kind of level dressing part where I just threw around rocks wildly and placed trees everywhere. Oh yeah, and then obviously we kind of picked a theme for every level, so kind of matching the whole, we want some new aspect of gameplay in each level. We also want some new visual aspect in new levels. So we have the ice level, the desert level, the woody mountains level, so usually that comes along with it as well.
So managing scope is a really important aspect of creating video games. How did you all work to manage the scope of the game as you were working on it? And how did the scope sort of change and shift throughout the development process?
Yeah, that's definitely a crucial part, I think, managing the scope, because also like for every, at least for indie projects, I'd say the biggest danger to any project is just overscoping and not being able to finish it. So it was something we were very aware of from the beginning on. So we originally, I think we even wanted to publish the whole game with 1 or 2 levels only. And then we set quite a tight deadline accordingly to kind of force ourselves to stick to this original scope and don't inflate it over time. So what we did was setting up the Steam page quite early, and then also as soon as we were fairly confident that we could manage to put out something publishable, we set a release date to just kind of constrain ourselves into the scope, and we also published a release date so people could kind of hold us accountable for it. And then a bit later on, we actually decided to make it early access, which I guess then inflated the scope a bit, but still we could stick to this original release date. And then I think now having the game in early access, the community helps us a bit to pick a wise scope for the game and like don't go overboard with things, so we can still update everything in time.
So tell me about that decision to launch the game in early access, because many game devs have to make the decision between waiting till they feel the game is finished or publishing it in early access to get feedback. So what was your motivation for publishing into early access?
Yeah, it was interesting for us as well, because we never did early access before. We were a bit skeptical, actually, how well it would work out and how well the whole process would go. But in hindsight, I think it was a great decision for us, because since Thronefall is so heavily dependent on content compared to the games we worked on before, where everything was procedurally generated, with Thronefall we really have to sit down and build level after level, and that just takes its time. So it just gave us a way to validate the gameplay of the whole concept very early on. And I think it was very, very important for us, especially being such a small team. We don't have huge resources for QA. And at some point, you kind of just lose the feeling for your own game and your own game's balancing, because you just play it over and over again. You get better and better at your own game, and then at some point you can't really judge anymore how it feels for a person playing the game for the first time. So I think it helps us a lot to just get constant feedback from the community to just balance everything right and make sure everybody's having a great experience.
Is there anything that you wish you sort of knew before starting work on the game?
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably. Well, I mean, in the end, we've been pretty surprised by a lot of things, including the very warm reception, even in early access. But I think I would not want to change anything about the way we worked on Thronefall in hindsight, because even though it was at times a bit chaotic, still the whole process, I think, worked out very well. So I'm pretty happy with it, honestly.
So earlier you talked about a member of your team leaving, the artist for your team. How did you all go about filling the, you said, hole of not having an artist?
Yeah, I guess we just had to try to fill this hole, but there's also the part of what makes indie game development exciting for me, because I like to learn about a lot of different subjects and like touch every aspect of a game. So we just tried to make do with what we had. Like I talked about this earlier, the art style we developed was definitely part of this struggle to find something that we can manage even without a dedicated artist. So we try to come up with a very, very simple art style that still looks unique, but you get away with very simple 3D models. You don't have to be an expert 3D modeler to add new content to the game. So we both can independently add new 3D models for new content we work on. We pretty much do both a lot of everything. So we're both able to program all right. We can both do a bit of sound. We can both do a bit of 3D. So everything is set up in a way that we can work on features pretty much independently. So we don't need another person to maybe implement the visuals for something new you implement. And yeah, I think generally that's the theme of the whole development process for us, was to just find ways to simplify things so much that you don't have to be an expert at it, but you could just like use whatever you could provide, and then it would kind of work out in the system we had there.
So the player doesn't really have free choice over where they place stuff, but they have choice over what they build in certain places. How did you all work to make the levels work in a way that while the players are forced into picking specific things, they can still go at it with many different strategies?
Yeah, I think I have to credit Jonas for this one. Like he did the fine-tuning of the gameplay system. But I think that was definitely an aspect that was very important to us. We wanted to have one side the simplicity of not having to think constantly about what to build where. I think that is maybe the main thing that makes regular tower defense and strategy games so hard at times, that you're just overwhelmed by your options. So we really like the simplicity aspect here, and we think it puts you in a great state of flow to just not having to think about that as much. But then at the other side, we obviously wanted to give advanced players enough room for the exploration of different strategies. And I think the whole perk system helps a lot there, that you can unlock new perks and then try different perk setup basically every playthrough and see what kind of perks have synergies with what kind of buildings. Like one common theme that is applied to pretty much everything is that some perks develop synergies with some special buildings. So some buildings get stronger if you are equipped with a certain perk. And I think that allows for a lot of different strategies. And then there's also this thing where you have variants of different buildings. For example, the windmill building does the same wherever you build it, but then you also can pick one of 4 specializations that maybe makes it more useful in one case than in another. And yeah, I think it's those subtleties that allow then for more complex strategies to evolve.
What do you feel is the most difficult part of creating video games?
Probably finishing them and naming them. Like naming things is just a nightmare. It's so hard. But then, yeah, probably the biggest difficulty is definitely picking the right scope for your project, and then finishing stuff. It's by far the hardest part, I'd say. At least for me. I love starting new things and like experimenting with new ideas and stuff. But then actually following through with one idea until the end.
I also struggle with naming things. I have to go through like 10 names for something before I publish it. Like, I think this podcast went through like 15 different names before I started it.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. It's a good name, though.
Thanks. What do you feel is the biggest lesson that you learned from working on Thronefall?
I think the biggest lesson is definitely that good is good enough and things don't have to be perfect. It's kind of relates to what we talked about earlier, the whole suddenly you're just only two people and maybe there are areas you lack the expertise to like expertly execute them, and then you have just to like make do with what's there. And in many cases, even I'd say things have a certain flavor to them if they are just, well, if they maybe they're not perfect, but they are all like they come all from the same. I don't know how exactly to describe this, but well, maybe sometimes it makes things extra special if they don't are super perfect, and sometimes you end up with very unexpected but nice things when you don't have perfected the workflow already. You just have to kind of like throw things around and see where you end up.
So the game is still in early access, meaning hopefully more updates will be coming soon. What sort of stuff can you tell me about what fans of the game can hope to expect in future updates?
Well, first and foremost, of course, more content. I think that's the biggest complaint of the community at the moment, is that people just want to have more levels to play through, obviously. And we're definitely intending on adding a couple of more levels to the game, and with that also more weapons and perks to choose from, more building types, more enemies. So in general, just more content. Then there, of course, are a couple of quality of life features we want to implement. Probably the biggest one is the save game feature. I'm working on that right now, because in its current state, you have to finish a level in one sitting, and you can't go to the menu or quit during playthrough. Otherwise, you have to start all over again. And of course, especially with the larger levels, this gets quite stressful. So right now we're implementing a system that allows you to save the game during play, like as any decent game should provide you with. And we probably also allow people then to restart from the last day after they lose. So you don't have to play the whole level all over again if you lost because of some certain maybe oversight or something. You're just allowed to restart from the last morning, so to speak, and you can just like play the previous day before you lost all over again, and then see if you can maybe make it then. And then I think we also want to explore some more experimental features and see what we can do with the gameplay system we have there in Thronefall. Like maybe something people wish for a lot is some kind of endless mode that has more, maybe not procedural maps, because that will be very hard, as I mentioned already, but maybe some kind of procedural game loop that allows for basically endless or infinite play.
What would be your biggest piece of advice to a newer game dev trying to go and like create their first game?
Keep it small. Definitely keep it small. But then also, don't ask for permission on, maybe you don't have the opportunity to join an official game design program or study at university. Still, just go for it. There's so many resources online, and basically everything you need to create a game is freely accessible online. So everything you need is a computer and internet access. And then just start small and definitely enjoy the process. Just create something that makes you happy and create something that you think you can finish. Don't do the next massive multiplayer online RPG, obviously. Just start out with something really, really small. And you can definitely approach it in different ways, but I'd always recommend to rather do many small things and really finish them up, because there's so much to learn at every stage of the process, that it's really worth to go through all stages of the process often. Because usually if you, like, for instance, prototype little stuff a lot but never finish a game, then you have, at one point, you're very experienced in the process of coming up with new ideas and prototyping them, but you're very inexperienced still with the parts that come after, like the middle stage of producing a game, the stage of actually publishing a produced game. So I'd always recommend to go through the whole process often, and therefore make small things and finish them up.
Do you have any plans for what you're going to work on after Thronefall?
No, I think with Grizzly Games, we are still going to be busy with Thronefall for a while. Obviously, we have to finish up the early access, which will, I guess, we don't have a set timeline there, but it will probably take us another year or so, maybe 10 months. Let's see how fast we can work, but it will definitely take some time. And we also have ambitions to port Thronefall to other platforms like Nintendo Switch or maybe even mobile. Let's see what the future brings there. Yeah, no, can say for sure now what will happen next.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great sitting down and talking with you.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this episode and want to see more stuff like it, make sure to follow or subscribe. Also, if you think a friend might like the show, make sure to share with them. And if you want to, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want to stay up to date with what's going on with Game Design Hour, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.